The following is a work of fan fiction inspired by Enzo Castellari's 1990 The Bronx Warriors. The year is 1991, a year after the Bronx is officially declared no man's land. The authorities give up all attempts to restore law and order. From then on, the cordoned-off borough is ruled by a warlord called the Ogre and his paramilitary gang, the Tigers. Gangs like the Riders, the Zombies, the Scavengers, the Street Pirates, and the Iron Men are left to squabble over the rest. Hot Dog had been waiting inside the truck at the designated rendezvous for a good 20 minutes when his companion finally showed, gave the sign, and swung himself up into the passenger side of the semi-truck cab. "You're late, kid," the surly truck driver grunted. Dealing with the general public wasn't Hot Dog's strong suit. If it was, he might have sold aluminum siding on Long Island or tended bar in Atlantic City. Maybe even worked in one of those offices in Midtown Manhattan. But who was he kidding? Those were jobs for a people person, and Hot Dog wasn't a people person. He preferred things. A layer of hot Zenith televisions, a half pallet of whiskey, 500 Cubans. Cigars, that is, not people. He wasn't a people person, whether it came to dealing with them or smuggling them. He worked alone, and that was how he liked it. Hot Dog had few friends, and he liked that too. Few friends meant fewer people to let you down. Well, they weren't even friends. More people he worked with on occasion. Leech, Ice, and occasionally that cop Hammer. Hammer was going to be the death of him one day. Today was an exception. He was delivering a sealed trailer full of inventory for the Manhattan Corporation, and they were sending a kid along. A strong kid, on the pretext of helping him unload on the other side. But Hot Dog knew a chaperone when he saw one. Someone to keep an eye on him. The kid was late to begin with. Hot Dog didn't like that. Deadlines were all that mattered in his line of work, or at least the most important thing that mattered. As had been arranged, the kid had knocked on the passenger door of the truck 3 times, opened it, and swung up into the vehicle. "I'm Billy. Billy Lowe," the kid announced cheerfully. "And if you ain't Hot Dog, we're in trouble." "Hot Dog's my handle," the trucker confirmed. "But the Bronx is always trouble," he added. The rig sighed as he released the brake and barreled down toward the checkpoint on a perfect road. They passed a series of warning signs on the way in. Signs that warned of the borough's recent official status as a no-go zone. It had been abandoned by the city a year earlier in 1990. At the checkpoint, they were greeted by a squad of armed GC Corporation guards. The GC Corporation had recently won the contract to police the perimeter after the scandal that was the robbery of the First National Bank. The brazen thieves had slipped out of the borough, then back in with a cool $17 million. Now there were new stewards of the thin line that separated the Bronx from polite society. The GC Corporation were a subsidiary of the Manhattan Corporation, as were the majority of global corporate entities nowadays, not to mention all of the paid-off politicians who'd signed off on abandoning their constituents in the forgotten borough. The checkpoint was predictably quiet. Nobody had any reason to enter the Bronx unless they absolutely needed to. Hot Dog paid the toll. The toll was essentially a sanctioned bribe to enter and do black market business behind the demarcation line. Everything within the borough, from the smallest aspirin to the biggest Cadillac, was black market contraband. Hot Dog and Billy were DNA scanned. If anyone other than them tried to exit any of the 3 armed checkpoints out of the Bronx in this truck, the contractors would turn the rig into Swiss cheese in short order with no questions asked. The contractors had no interest whatsoever in the security-sealed trailer. The GC Corporation had no interest whatsoever in what went into the Bronx, so neither did their contractors. Every black market can of baby formula marked up by 500% was an effective weapon in the ongoing unofficial genocide. Nothing going in would draw attention, and a little being allowed through for the gangs and residents to squabble over provided plausible deniability over the engineered genocide of an entire borough. It was as cold as it was calculated. "Is this your first run, kid?" Hot Dog asked as the block around them quickly transitioned from gentrified to largely abandoned. The road also became remarkably different quite quickly. Cracked and pockmarked with potholes. "Sure is," Billy replied. "My uncle's on the board. Wants me to see how the other half lives." The kid pulled down the visor, and as he did, Hot Dog noticed something in a shoulder holster underneath his jacket. It wasn't cause for alarm in and of itself. Only a fool would come into no man's land unarmed. But there was an unspoken law when it came to weapons here. Guns were exclusively for made men, the Tigers. When the Great Ogre had seized control in the early days, he had wisely realized that guns were going to be a problem if the Bronx was to be prevented from destroying itself. Ogre had regulated guns more effectively than Manhattan. He controlled the food, medicine, vice, and gasoline, so it was only common sense that he and the Tigers had exclusivity over the guns in the Bronx. Any other weapon save a bow or crossbow was acceptable. That was the law. But anyone other than a tiger caught with a firearm would be summarily executed. It was fine for this kid to be packing heat in theory. As long as it was hidden, nobody would search him. There were no cops in the Bronx. But if he lost his cool and used it, even on a lowlife like a scavenger who wouldn't be missed, the whole borough would come down on him in no time. And the resident or gang member that surrendered the firearm to the Tigers would be kept in oil or gasoline all winter. Hot Dog had his own protection, but it wasn't a gun or even a Trojan in his wallet. It was a sock full of pennies in his jacket pocket, Paul Kersey, Death Wish style. Did your uncle explain the attitude of the locals to guns? Hot Dog asked, pointing at Billy's armpit. The kid grinned back sheepishly. Don't sweat it. These are nunchucks. Deadlier than any gun in the right hands, Billy explained. Hot Dog nodded and grunted with a wry smile. I just hope those are the right hands, he observed dismissively. The truck driver was relieved that it wasn't a gun. The Bronx was lawless, but a broad prohibition against guns in the hands of anyone other than a tiger was basically house policy. All was quiet outside the cab as they made their way past abandoned buildings and into the heart of the Bronx. They were briefly shadowed by several of the riders' gang on motorcycles. Low-level members, Sandy and Speedy. Trash and his main lieutenant Ice were nowhere to be seen. Probably off stealing some little old lady's handbag, Hot Dog thought to himself. The riders peeled off after a block or so. Generally, outside freight wasn't touched by low-level gangs or solo criminals. It was assumed that it was going to someone more powerful, usually the Tigers. And the average low-level rider or street pirate didn't want to incur the wrath of the Great Ogre. They usually just made these performative shows of strength to save face. Billy saw someone peering at them from a manhole before pulling the cover back over themselves. Scavengers. Hot Dog grunted. They occasionally come up from the sewers, he explained. Rare to see one snooping around up here in daylight. Things must be getting tough down there. Billy was clearly perplexed by the cultural nuances of the Bronx. It's like goddamn Madagascar here, the kid observed. All these isolated indigenous species. Yeah, but with a big difference, Hot Dog explained. A Madagascar lemur doesn't try and boost the hubcaps off your truck. Billy snorted as he laughed at the comparison. They finally reached their intended destination. Lion territory. The Lions were a gang of organized criminals who had seemingly come out of nowhere. They dressed in suits, and the word on the street was that they were being bankrolled by someone with enormous money and influence. Their preferred weapons were knuckle dusters and cutthroat razors. The truck was escorted by two Lions Rolls-Royces into an abandoned warehouse. Hot Dog and Billy Lowe exited the truck as instructed and waited for their contact by the rear doors of the sealed trailer. They didn't have to wait long. Gentlemen, I'm Leo, the swarthy man barked as he approached with his entourage of lions. The suited-up collection of gentlemen looked like a bunch of extras from a Guy Ritchie movie. Pleased to meet you, Leo. I'm Billy Lowe, the kid replied, extending his hand. Likewise, Leo boomed as he shook his hand. And you must be Hot Dog. Hot Dog nodded. May I unwrap my cargo? Leo asked with the excitement of a child on Christmas morning. Hot Dog nodded, and the gang leader used a straight cutthroat razor to cut the plastic seal on the rear doors of the trailer. Hot Dog had no idea what the cargo was. He'd collected the already sealed trailer that morning. He guessed they'd all find out together. Leo's men began to unload the trailer, and Hot Dog was shocked to learn of the inventory he'd been carrying. Handguns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, shotguns, hand grenades, rocket launchers, and enough crates of ammunition to start a revolution. Enough weaponry to get all of them killed 100 times over if anyone ever learned he'd brought it all in. Hot Dog and Billy had committed the worst offense imaginable. They had disregarded one of the very few laws in the Bronx, and the one law where leniency was not a possibility. Hot Dog quickly collected his payment as the last piece of cargo. A crate of .45 caliber ammunition was unloaded. What's the plan for all this stuff? Hot Dog asked Leo. No plan you need to know. just leveling up the playing field. The Tigers have had a monopoly on everything for too long, the gang boss grinned. Hot Dog and Billy shut and bolted the rear doors of the trailer, excused themselves, and drove back the way they came. Whatever the plan was for this delivery of contraband was anyone's guess. He just hoped nobody would connect the dots to his truck, or to him and Billy. Billy sat with a knowing smile as the sun began to set way off west down the Hudson River. Whatever the plan was, it wasn't good and involved the Manhattan Corporation. Hot Dog wondered if he ought lay low for a while. Maybe take some work someplace nice like transportation of prefab solar houses around the Southwest. Places like New Mexico. Who was to say what the intentions would be for this arsenal? That was above Hot Dog's pay grade. After all, he only drove the truck and delivered the goods.